Hello and welcome to our fundamental demo meeting. Today is August 21st, and we would like to show you some of the progress that we've been working on in the last roughly 2 months. Let me start the presentation mode. So initially, usually we present news from the 4 libraries: Fundamental, Styles, Angular, React, and Vue. But this time we'll skip the Vue because the team is quite busy right now and they couldn't prepare anything for the demo. But hopefully next time it's going to be much more exciting stuff from their side. Nevertheless, we would like to give you updates and show you some features and improvements from the other libraries. And before jumping to the libraries, one small update related to the cross libraries. What we were able to convince and add to our repositories is the mergeable bot. So it allows us to enforce quality FPR, especially in terms of following properly the semantic versioning. So in this case, we don't have to do manual checks for each PRs, especially for people contributing out of the teams, and we can only focus on the addition of the pull request rather than checking all the criteria for the semantic versioning. So this is really good and enables us, the team, to focus more on the creative part. It's enabled in all our repositories. So once there is a PR, you're going to see a step within the checks that have to be done. And if it fails, you can even see what exactly which steps are failing. We intentionally put that you can have a PR in work in progress. So, that will make the PR not already mergeable, even if if all the other checks are really approved or green. And that's about it. So let's move to the libraries itself, and we will start with fundamental styles. Before handing over to Jenna, I think I just want to say that we've been doing tremendously effort of refactoring a lot of stuff, but more from that, I'll give it to Jenna. Jenna, do you want to also share the screen?
Greg's actually going to start first and go over self-contained styles.
So yes, I do have a share. So the biggest refactoring that we're doing in the fundamental styles is doing something we're calling self-contained styling. Just a quick background on what that is. So we've got a little playground here where we've got side-by-side iframes where on one side, if we open up a page and look at the source, you can see we're actually loading all the styles for every single component, regardless of which page you're looking at. So this list will continue to go and go and go, and you'll see all the CSS that gets streamed into this playground page. Whereas on the self-contained side, what we're testing and validating is that when we look in here, the only styling you'll see here are classes related to FD button, and then a few other things related to either icons and or fonts that might be necessary to render this specific component. To make sure that essentially the component, when it comes from an implementation library, either React, Angular, or Vue, can be dropped on a blank page that has no other styling, or even if it has other styling, especially like tag level selectors, that's not going to bleed in and none of this styling will bleed out. We've got some toggles here. We call it unnormalize to purposely set some egregiously bad values for font size, margins, paddings, whatnot, a bunch of table tags. And you'll see that although a lot of the page does change with those values, that the actual components, the individual buttons, do not. And they look identical sized and whatever as you scroll. Obviously buttons is a huge example because there's a bunch of them, but as a comparison, if I go back to one that we haven't completed yet, if I pull up table, you'll see here with all the styles loaded, whether it's normalized or unnormalized, that the table component itself looks fine. Over here, we don't have any self-contained styles for table yet. So you'll see what happens. A, it's not initially styled, and then B, the unnormalize makes it look even 100 times worse. So that's ultimately the goal. If you're ever in these libraries, also you'll notice, if I go to like a different component, because it's self-contained styling, we've got a lot of components that are, we'll call them complex components that are really more of a pattern that are made up of multiple components. Like an action bar is actually made up of buttons and some other things on the component itself. So in our playground, we've purposely not put the fundamental related buttons on these anymore, because on these particular pages, the only thing we're testing is the FD action bar related styles. That things are positioned correctly and lined up correctly, but we don't care about the styling of the buttons, because an implementation library will end up bringing the button styles with it when they assemble this component in their library. So a few of these pages, as you look at them, may look weird like that, where you're like, well, why are these unstyled buttons here? And that's the reason, is we don't want to bring fully styled complex examples into this playground. Otherwise, we can't actually validate if the minimum amount of styling comes with the package. So that's a background on that. Unless anyone has any questions, I'll turn it back to Jenna.
Alrighty, so building further on that, so we're going to change a bit about how the pipeline works and how we deliver these self-contained styles. So we've worked to make sure they're all encapsulated. They components that need fonts have fonts, components that need icons have icons. So therefore, our previous publishing isn't kind of what we're going to move forward with. So we have this new components directory, and we have been publishing this as we've worked through it. So all the self-contained styles live here. So these will now be published and processed using post-CSS. So you'll get CSS files. So if you're used to using from these components in here, these will no longer be published as CSS, but the SAS directory will still be published. So you can still grab them there. But we'll be moving the build pipeline to focus on these self-contained styles. We're also going to use post-CSS to handle Internet Explorer. So we'll no longer need this fundamental styles, IE 11. We can remove all the fallbacks and have that handled automatically. And when we do this hasn't been implemented yet. It's probably in the next week or so, but it will have really detailed release notes, and these will be a breaking change. So the minor version will be bumped because we're a 0th library. We also removed several components from fundamental styles that didn't really make sense to have as components there. While they're still going to exist in the implementation libraries, most of their styling had to revolve around popover and poppers. And in the implementation libraries, popper actually lives separately in the DOM. So those styles were actually only necessary for the fundamental styles doc site. So those have been removed as components, and we'll have a detailed list when we finalize that. So some future changes to look forward to. We're slowly starting to convert to the theme designer variables. That way we can bring in their package that they're now publishing. CSS fallbacks get easier. We can share more easily with UI5 web components. And we're also hoping to come up with a different icon or font solution, possibly a CDN, but we haven't fully landed on what we're going to do. But that's those are things to look forward to in the next couple of weeks or so. And I think that's it for fundamental styles, unless anyone wanted to add anything.
I'll raise a question now or at the end. But it looks exciting what's going to come on the fundamental styles, as not only the reference libraries that are going to benefit, but whoever is using fundamental styles or will be using also will get the theming parameters included, and then we'll be able to theme the components or get with different themes applied by the theme designer. If there's no more questions, we'll jump to the Fundamental-vue or Fundamental-ngx library, and I'll hand it over to Ina. Ina, are you ready to
Yes.
Jump?
I can start sharing. Let me know if you see my screen.
We see you're not in presentation mode, but now you are.
Yes, so for the couple few sprints, in Fundamental-ngx, we added a couple of new feature and components. I've listed them here so you can see we added the split button, the localization editor, and also the select. In terms of new features, we worked a lot in the internationalization and the form validation for calendar and daytime picker. Yedre will talk about it in a minute. We also added accessibility improvements and ng at schematics that then we'll show later. For the major refactoring, like I said, we invested a lot of time refactoring our calendar, date picker, time picker, and daytime picker. We also refactored tabs, badge and label, inline help, combo box, and in the documentation, we kind of split it, some components. For example, select, combo box, and input search, which will let the user easily find our components in the documentation page. Next slide. So for the breaking changes, I won't go into details. I listed a couple of our major breaking changes, but if you click on the link, it will lead you to our GitHub wiki page where we in detail listed all the breaking changes for each version. So if you want to upgrade your version, you can go and check in details what are the breaking changes. I believe you could click here. You can see how it looked before, how it looks now. So you can easily refactor the code. Next slide. Our next steps, we are going to refactor the site navigation, also improve and refactor the shell bar, integrate self-contained styles once they are ready from fundamental styles. We are going to invest some time collaborating with Ariba teams, which are starting to use fundamentals, and they also expressed they also want to invest in adding new features and meeting the gaps they need. We are going to add new components and Angular 8 support. For the calendar, I'm going to hand over to Yedre, who's going to present what we worked on, the calendar and daytime picker.
Okay.
I will stop sharing.
Okay, great. So I'm sharing my screen then. Okay, you can see my screen. Okay, great. So as it was said before, we did a huge refactor on calendar, and also it touched the date picker and daytime picker. We changed completely the structure of calendar. Right now we've got the structural structure, like it's the modular structure. The calendar right now has got the day view, the month view, and the year view. Like they are separated components. The things we did also is improving the keyboard support. Right now, as you can see, we can change the date. We can change the months, years by not touching the mouse. Okay. We also added some disable and block functions right to the calendar. We improved a little bit range selection because, as you could see, it was single selection. Thanks to the model, right now we are not basing on on the JS, vanilla JS date object. Right now we've got our own object, which is, I mean, it's more easier to maintain it. And there were several problems with JS date objects, like the months. For example, the months were switching by one. I don't know why. It was really weird. Okay, we added the programmatic change on calendar. As you can see, it's great. We can start the calendar from the other day than the Sunday, because the default one is Sunday right now. And as you can see, there is the Monday. It's achieved by passing some variables into inputs. We also did some internalization. As you can see, before the month names were in English, here are in French, and also the day names are in French. I mean the short name, please. We also did improvements in the reactive forms. Before right now, the reactive forms can be used. I mean, the date picker can be used in form group, and they can say if the actual date in the calendar is valid or not. As you can see right now, the flag is set to valid. I mean, it's showing that the valid is true. But if we set, of course, invalid date, it will just show the valid false. It also works, of course, for range mode in calendar. If we set invalid date, it just goes to false. Okay, I will go to date picker, because date picker is also basing on the calendar. The most interesting things that were done in the date picker was the internationalization. If you can see right now, there is Bulgarian. I mean, there's the Bulgarian months and Bulgarian days. If we change to German, right there will be the German ones. And of course, the French, and we will do French ones. We achieved it by providing some service with some variables. The user can just specify which language, and I mean, he has to name this language and all the variables. So he can just do some custom things here, and he can provide the service to our calendar, which is using it. It's also the thing for the area labels. It's more for this is for support. Yes, for support. For example, the blind people that are using the screen reader. Let's go further. Yes, we also added formatting things. As you could see before, it was the slashes. Here are dashes. If we change the dashes, it's of course, if we put some invalid, for example, if we put some slash thingies, it will be treated as an invalid. We have to put like that. And also we added it to the range mode. We also improved the reactive forms on date picker. And as you can see, if we just change the date to invalid, then the valid will set to false. The same thing is for the range date. Okay, let's go to datetime picker. Datetime picker uses the date model and the time model. I mean, it's like the calendar and the time component merged. And as you can see, if we change anything there, it will be changed on input. Of course, we also improved the things with the keyboard support here. Like, user can just change the hours, change the meridian things by keyboard. We add the programmatic change. You could see we change it. Let's do this again. Click change, it changes to 10th October. The things we also added here is we improved the forms here. And as you can see, if we change it, then the valid, of course, it will be set to false. Yes, I think that's it for the calendar things, for the calendar refactor. So I think I will hand over to Ina right now.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm going to show the combo box.
Great. So I'm stopping sharing.
So I believe you see my screen now.
Yes.
Okay. So search input is now being deprecated. We will still have the component for a few versions, but you can use combo box instead now. So combo box is a composed component. We are using input group and popover components to accomplish the autocomplete like experience. So for example, if you start typing apple, you will see the apple and pineapple with the highlight, and also only these two items will appear in the search list. You can disable the highlighting. So if you again start writing apple, you won't see the highlight. This is achieved by the highlighting property set to false. You can you can pass a custom filter function where you can basically specify what your search function will do. We here have an example with this custom filter function, and you can pass it as a property. And for example, if I now start typing for apple, we will have the selected index and the selected item. You can also pass a display function input, which allows you passing object arrays to the combo box. And here we provided an example. These are the values, and you don't pass, like in the other case, just string values. You can pass objects, and you can also modify the output. Here we capitalize the items. For example, apple. You see here we use apple like this, and then you capitalize them. You can also use observable async pipes if you're working with observables. And the last option is you can also use a custom item template. For example, here we have the name of the item plus an icon. And here we have the example with the ng template, which is our custom template. And if you don't have any questions, you can pass it to Deno.
I had a question I posted in the chat.
Maybe while she's reading, I can present the next feature and then try to address it after. How about like that?
Fine with
That
me.
sounds good.
What I'll be demoing, one of the things is like how quick you can add fundamental styles and fundamental Angular to your Angular application. It takes like one command, and because of the network, it can take 30 seconds. But before doing so, what I want to show is here I created an empty initial application with the Angular CLI. So we can just take a quicker look. I'm opening the Visual Studio. I will try to run the application. So you can see that initially in the dependency, there is no any fundamental library included. In the Angular JSON, the style that it depends, it's only the style as CSS, and then in the node modules, obviously they won't be any fundamental included. We can go in the browser and take a look. Let me just remove the Zoom tab. So this is the initial template that Angular CLI creates. So let's go there and just remove it. So I'll go in the source and application. Here, this is oops, this is the source code. I will just do Fundamental-ngx application. And let's just make a break, create a break, and then add a new button. Click me. And if I save and then go back in the browser, you see, I mean, this is just a new HTML without a CSS applied. So even if I try to put, for example, class FD button, you won't see any difference because the library is not there yet. So let's go there and now add fundamental styles and Fundamental-ngx with one command. So we created a schematics for Angular, which allows us with this command basically to add dependencies to Fundamental-ngx and style, and including it into the application. So basically after that, you're good to go to use your any components from the library. So this is asking me whether I want to include also the animation as part of the of these steps. I picked yes. I mean, it doesn't matter much right now for the demo, but nevertheless, I just want to show. So this is the two files. Well, 3 files were updated. So let's just run the application and we go back in the code. You can see that in the Angular JSON, what was added was the styling file from the fundamental styles, and in the package JSON, the new library that was added is the Fundamental-ngx. You might wonder or ask yourself, where is fundamental styles? Recently, due to the changes that you've seen from Greg and Jenna in fundamental styles, now fundamental styles is it's a peer dependency. No, it's the direct dependency, sorry, not peer. And then it will be included by itself. So if I go in the application, again, you see there are slight changes in terms of fonts because there is reset on the application level, but there's still nothing yet. So I can do just the fundamental styles, do a class and do FD button, and then you see the button being rendered. My intention was that this goes inside. And I can make it also emphasized. And this is the emphasized button. But that's not everything, right? This is just the styling. So you're good to go to use styling right away. Let's go and include, I would like just to play with the button and the date picker. So what I can do, I can come in the application module. I can do import. I'll leave this first empty and do from Fundamental-ngx. So you see there is auto-completion TypeScript. It's offering you. Oops. I will do. I'll include the button module, and also just for simplicity, I'll include the date picker module. I'll come here and import it, and so now we can use the this component. So I'll come and do FD button, which it's a directive that brings the Fundamental-ngx button, and then I will add label, let's say, choose a date, and do FD date, the one that you've seen from the other presentation. So we're going to go back here, and then yes, we get the button and we have the date picker. It's working as it should be working. It's a single click. So what I can do, I can come and say, I think it's a type range, and then once it renders, I can pick range dates. You may wonder, I mean, do I want to include one by one all the modules I need? You can. Again, this is an option that maybe you decide to pick explicitly which components you want to include, but also we offer, instead of separate modules, you can include Fundamental-ngx module, which is, you have access right away to all the components. So this is another alternative to reduce the code, but then basically you're including everything. So if I come and refresh, it shouldn't change much. That's what I wanted to show for the schematics and how easy to start using and including fundamentals into your Angular library. The other one, the other feature or component that I wanted to show is like on the documentation page, we included a selected example with a selective native. So in this case, it gives you like a, a code that you can include directly select and then how it looks like. So this is native select. Each browser, they render it differently. This is in Chrome how it works. And then we also offered our select, which behaves similar. The only difference is that it looks like, the combo box applying the Fiori tree look and feel. You can open and close it programmatically. So this is open. I can close it. So here you see the values, and then I can change to another value programmatically. Custom value. So if I pick Apple, you can reformat the code that the text that it's been selected. You can have, again, more nested representations within the select. And the other thing is you can pass a custom template for the option being selected. Just another flexibility. You can add option programmatically, and of course you can remove it programmatically. And of course, form usage. That's pretty much what I wanted to show. Maybe now we can open the stage for questions. Not everything. We have also fundamental React, but maybe we want to discuss questions now for Angular, or maybe we should wait for at the end. What do you guys think? Let's wait for the end. I think there are some questions coming, so I want to go over while Jenna and Greg presenting the fundamental React. How about like that?
Okay. So Fundamental React doesn't have very many updates. We've been really focused on the self-contained styles work in fundamental styles. But due to that, we're going to have some upcoming breaking changes. We've mostly been working on just small bug fixes and dependency bumps. But once that new pipeline is in place for fundamental styles, we'll be bringing in the CSS files that are generated from that new pipeline into our components so that you can just drop a component on the page. So consumers will need to update their Webpack configuration to handle CSS if it doesn't already. If you have CSS at all, it's already configured to handle CSS. So this will probably not require many changes, but we'll document all the breaking changes all the changes in the README for the setup, and we'll have detailed release notes for any breaking changes. But that should be coming up pretty quickly after we release fundamental styles. I lost my Zoom bar, of course.
I can start sharing, and I guess you'll lose the sharing.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
It hid from me.
Yeah. So basically one more slide, and then we can enter the conversations. The question and answer conversation. I just want to repeat one more time. These are our repositories. They're open source, so it's welcome for contribution and also consumption. We have the respective NPM packages. We have our dedicated workspace for fundamentals. If you're not there, you can join and then raise questions, even see answers from previous questions. Now we have Jessica. She's the communication, and now she will be using also Twitter for sending news related to versions, also like demos like today. So yeah, thanks Jessica for this. And then we can open the stage for questions. And I see a few questions in the chat. One of them is the daytime picker allows formatting in 24 hours time. Is it possible to choose using 24 hours instead of 12 a.m.? So yeah, time picker, yeah, it has two options. You can open it with, by default with, 24, or you can also, instantiate it with a Meridian object. This is the second last. For which use case should I use SAP Fundamentals? So that's a very good question. As we know, Fiori 3 is still in a phase of many components to be finalized, and due to that fact, it brings a lot of breaking changes. SAP Fundamentals, it's already in a version 1.0. So if we want to follow the semantic versioning, each breaking change would force us to create another major version. So let's say, imagine if there are like 40 breaking changes in the next half a year, then we have to release 40 major versions if we want to release regularly as we are releasing right now. For that purpose, we decided, let's create the next version of the fundamentals style as a fundamental style, started with version 0, and then do all the breaking changes while releasing under the version 0.
Yeah. I think the question was more, sorry, I had asked questions in between. I think the question was more, why use fundamentals in general, just any of the implementation over.
Okay. I'm sorry. Well, again, it depends on the solution you're trying to implement, the whole stack, the technologies that you have access to. So fundamentals as a federated way of driving libraries, it gives you different options. So you can go with just fundamental styles, which is the CSS, and you can apply it to any technology, right? You can go to any legacy, all GSPs, apply it, and then you will get the right styling as long as the markup follows the specification from the fundamentals. And then, of course, if you're using Angular, or this is what you want to use, or you have partners system where they're for them using Angular, it's better, then this is the better approach for you. The same for React and Vue. Open source and the community, it's quite active. So if your ecosystem is around these three frameworks, obviously this will be your better pick or choice. But then if you're like living in SAP stack, everything that you get from SAP, then I guess SAP UI5 would be the better choice in this case. Did I answer it? Maybe Jenna, you want to add something more, or other people?
Yeah, I think that about sums it up. Because I mean, the UI5 library is great, and it's just a different use case. It's more drag and drop, place on the page, and you're ready to go, and it's integrated with all the SAP tools, which is great. But the fundamental libraries allows you to have more customized components and more input if you need a specific component, more customization. I think that hits all the points.
Any questions on the phone?
So I had a question on the date picker that was demoed. Probably more the date time picker, but I think it's all kind of relevant. So as the date time picker is present on the screen, and you've got both your calendar and your time controls, are updates within the picker updating in the input immediately? Because I'm curious on a use case, if let's say you're doing this keyboard wise and you tab to the button and you spawn the picker and you're tabbing around, how do you tell the date and time picker you're done? Choosing a date, an hour, a minute, a second, the meridian, however many selections you need. And secondarily, how do you abort any changes that you were making?
Good question.
Yeah, I think we probably need to take this offline. But I think what Greg is kind of raising is there's an accessibility concern here that SAP Concur has previously resolved in our internal library, and we're going to see the same issue again here. And it really has to do with when you have a pop over component like this, like a date picker or a time picker. When you have multiple values to select, so for a date picker, generally you only have one value to select. You're going to select a current date. And so in that case, because you have one value to select, as soon as you select a date, hitting return or enter to accept it is considered acceptable from an accessibility perspective. But when you have a time picker involved, you need to allow the tab key to tab between the existing available inputs to alter the values. And so if the tab key is going to be allowed for you to tab through the available values, there then has to be a way to then accept those values. So that means that when you're using a time picker, there has to be an OK cancel, or at least an OK, an accept kind of button at the bottom. That would mean for a time picker. That would also mean for when you combine them as a date time picker, you would have to have that kind of OK dialogue capability, so that you can potentially exit through and escape. This is all accessibility. This is all accessibility.
It makes sense.
I believe when you look at, I don't think this has been. There's not a time picker yet in the UI5 web components. You know, for those listening here, we talked a little bit about UI5 versus fundamentals here. UI5 itself is actually segmenting into two broad categories. There is kind of the, I don't know the correct terminology, I think maybe legacy UI5 or the monolithic UI5 library, and the next generation UI5 library, which is the web components library. We are trying to, over time, align ourselves to the same visual look and feel that we see coming out of the UI5 library. They have not yet produced a time picker, so we don't have really anything to kind of verify against that. But I think there is some time picker examples in some of the UX documentation that probably does show kind of an OK cancel button in this particular scenario. And if it doesn't, it needs to.
It makes sense. Thanks for the, it's a really valuable input. I mean, especially like if you have any search criteria refer to the date time frame, and you can hit any time you changed minute, it might trigger some kind of on the backend. I mean, if it's not that smart enough. So it's also not only accessibility, but could be performance issue. So yeah, that's a good point. Thanks, Greg and Brad. Any other questions? I mean, you can always reach out to us in Slack if you want, or other channels as well. You can, come to the repositories in GitHub and take a look, open an issue, or even fix an issue. So thanks for joining, and then hope to see you guys in a month or two for our next demo.
Thank you for doing this, Dano.
Thanks to the whole team and the whole dedication and passion.